Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hey friends, welcome back. How you doing? All right, I might be a little scratchy, a little juicy. I'm recovering from COVID. So it was a 48-hour tornado, right? In and out. Couple of weird lingering side effects. But I am optimistic I will continue to heal. So excuse my juiciness, and I will introduce you to today's guest. Thank goodness that I recorded today's guest before I got COVID. Today's guest is Bhavana Smith. She is the founder of Until There Are Nine, which is a network and resource group whose purpose is to give women the power to advocate for their rightful share of compensation, rewards, and professional advancement. This is awesome work. Bhavana is one of my former colleagues, and she is a shining example of turning annoyance and frustration and anger around a particular situation into social advocacy. Bhavana has over 25 years of marketing, advertising, and consulting experience. And when speaking to her friends and colleagues, she realized that there was limited support for understanding around negotiation skills that were needed in order to increase one's compensation. So what did she do? She sent out to design a way and then shared the lessons and experiences with other women. What she learned in this process was that the reluctance to negotiate was one of the top reasons for the gender pay gap. Friends, this is real. In this episode, we get down with it. We talk about the negotiation tactics for closing the gap. We talk about how to negotiate and navigate the new pay transparency laws that differ based on location and jurisdiction. We also talk about what she learned in the relationships in client management and how trust and transparency both are needed. And then we talk about how she managed her mind when she realized that she was in a job that she didn't really want. And then lastly, we talk about the free tools and resources that she has created that are available to everyone, regardless of their gender. So I'm going to put her information in the show notes and also where to get all of those juicy resources. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. And as always, friends, I'll see you on the other side. Hey, Bhavana, how are you?
Hey, Jill. Great to be here.
I'm so glad that you are. Okay, so I always start all of my podcasts by asking my guests, take us way back to the beginning and tell us, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh, boy, I think the earliest career that I can think of that I wanted to be was a lawyer. And for anyone that knows me, that's not entirely surprising.
Nope, that's not surprising at all.
And I think it was, my mom, I remember saying, you'd be a great lawyer. You love to argue. And that is true to this day. I love to argue, but I did not become a lawyer. And although I actually wanted to be a Supreme Court justice when I first, read about or learned about Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first, Supreme Court female. And I said, oh my God, that's so amazing. I would love to be that. That's what I'm going to be. And then I realized I had to go to the whole lawyering part first.
Right.
I just wanted to jump straight to the Supreme Court justice.
Right. Yeah. No, I love it. And I think also as we talk this morning, people will start to see how that lawyering and what your mom classified as arguing, how that actually is advocacy and how it plays into what you've done throughout your career and what you're doing today. So I think that's a really interesting. I love seeing those early threads and how they pull through. So take us through high level, tell us about your career. Where did you start? Take us through.
Sure. So I started my career as an intern at a media agency, which is now Wavemaker. And it was, a very long time ago. But I think even prior to that, I do, want to call out, I have been working since I was 14 years old. Wow. I've had so many different odd jobs, from Burger King to, women's retail, to valet parking and market research, phone room supervisor. And so I've been working for a very long time. And I feel like it was all very helpful information and experiences to have. But I started as an intern, and which really, when I was still a senior in college, and that actually continued and led right into becoming a media planner, and ended up, giving me my media career on the agency side for about 15 years. And I felt myself feeling very, restless, bored. I wasn't learning. I wanted some different conversations with clients and colleagues. And frankly, I was really getting tired of having the same conversation about day part mixes and, levels of planning and what we should do. And it was just very tactical. And I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something different.
Yeah.
So I started looking and working with headhunters. And there was an opportunity that came about at Accenture, which is, I think everybody knows, very large consulting firm. And I ended up getting the job and taking it. And my colleagues back on the agency side were kind of like, wait, what? You're going to Accenture? And this was, way before it was.
That's a pretty significant pivot. That's a pretty significant pivot.
Huge. 15 years on agency side, and that's all you know. Yeah. And working at a company like Accenture, which felt very, I have to say, very corporate, as corporate as it gets, very grown up. And so I moved over there. And I remember the first, few months, I remember thinking, what did I do? This is,
did I make a mistake?
Expected, and this is very tactical, because I came from the planning and the strategy side of the agency business. And now I was very much on almost the post-buy analysis for those, who work in advertising may know what I'm talking about. Right. It was very tactical, and it was very tactical, detailed work. And I couldn't understand why those clients that I used to work and have these strategic conversations with cared about some of these details.
What Bhavana's talking about is when you buy media, you buy it usually anywhere from 6 months or more in advance. And then we make a prediction about what's going to be happening in the marketplace. So then after it buys, we want to look at the data to see, did we actually get the size of the audience that we thought we were going to get? So there's a lot of, when you go into media and advertising, there is a lot of math and a lot of analysis and data that you're looking at. And that's what she's referring to, just to make sure everybody is tracking along with what we're talking about.
Thanks for explaining that, Jill. Yeah. So it was just so detailed and nuanced. I just couldn't understand why clients cared about this stuff. And I felt I had taken a step back in my kind of strategic career, right? Of using my brain and the strategy side of my brain. But I said, you know what? Just stick with that. Give it a year. You can't go back, because everyone was like, well, see you in 6 months, and, back on the agency side. So I felt like I know it wasn't very supportive when I left. And I said to myself, there's got to be something that you can learn from this job. There has to be something. And 6 months went by, a year went by. And after that year, I just started to really learn so much about the business from a completely different perspective. It was almost like getting, starting to take my master's in agency management. Okay. Because clients were hiring us not to really check on the details. Yes, that was the actual work product that we were producing, but I realized why they were hiring us. They wanted to know that they could trust that their agency was doing right by them. So, in those first few months, when I said to myself, there has to be something that you can learn, the work continued to be quite detailed and, and frankly, boring for me. But what I learned from it was, the reason that they're asking for this work, the reason that they're coming to us in droves is because they want verification, trust.
The question behind the question.
Right. The question behind the question. And I learned a tremendous amount between how to manage client and agency relationships, but more importantly, how a company like Accenture actually manages their own business and manages their own people and talent and, everything from, contracting and legal to financial tracking and engagements. It was just an incredible learning experience. So in those first few months when I was there, I said, just stick with it for a year. I ended up staying there for 7 years.
Wow. Okay. So I want to go a little bit deeper. So the one thing that you said is you kept saying to yourself, like, just stick with it. How did you manage your mind on the day-to-day basis? Because it really sounds, I don't know if I would say easy, but it sounds kind of simple to say, okay, 11 months left, 10 months left, just see what I can get in this time and stay a year before I reassess what to do next. But in the day-to-day, you have to stay motivated. Otherwise, you're not going to perform. How did you manage your mind?
So it is tough to stay motivated. Now, it had to be interesting enough, right, to keep me there. And the people were good to work with. And I was learning. And I think that's the key for me. Mm-hmm. If I'm getting paid to learn, I will stick with the job.
Got it. And I think that's a really good takeaway for people. Like, sometimes it's not always feeling like the best match right away. And it may be a place that it gets better. It may be a place that you maybe need to reassess and decide to leave. But in the meantime, what can you learn from that situation? Right.
So I was just learning something, and I decided to really almost pull myself back and from the day to day. And I think, I don't know if I did this on a daily basis, but often enough where I took my mindset out of the day to day of what I was doing and actually up to a very high level, almost a 10 or 50,000 foot view, and saying, what can I thread together? Like, what's the learning that I can thread together from the totality of this work that I'm doing? That, yes, I have to do all of this process laden work, but what is the meaning behind it? What is the reason behind it? That, that it's required by this company.
Yeah. I worked for a brilliant woman, Laura Desmond, at Starcom Media Vest Group under Publicis. It's now the remaining assets are Starcom and Spark Foundry. And she used to always say spaceships and lawnmowers. You have to be a spaceship, and then you also have to be a lawnmower. You have to constantly go up high and then come back into the details and really navigate that so that you understand the pivots that need to be made, right? I always thought that was a great way of thinking about it.
That is a great way. And I think that's really what I applied while I was there. And after a few years, I didn't have to worry anymore about, being, bored, because I was interested in what I was doing. And I think one of my favorite things to do, where I did learn a ton, and, not just about the work and the process, but also the clients and the people, running the process, was agency pitch management. That was just really interesting and exciting because, yes, I got to, go to the agency presentations and see the pitches from the other perspective. And then really, after lunch, or during lunch with clients, understand, kind of like get their thoughts, like what they were,
right, how they're processing all of that.
Yeah. What they said in the meeting versus what they were actually telling me as their pitch consultant during lunch. But it was also, that was a learning, right? That was my takeaway, that clients will say the nicest thing because that's the polite thing to do, but they may not always mean that. So let's not get too excited if you hear great feedback, because that doesn't necessarily mean the meeting went great. So I learned just, kind of almost the psychology of that. So
what did you learn in that, as like just hearing you say that and thinking about the role you were playing? Maybe this is just my positive mindset. I don't think that it's so much about brands mistrusting agencies, but I think it's like when you think about the volume of business they're giving to a particular agency and how important it is. And yes, you have senior leaders, but sometimes you also have junior people on your business, that it's more that you're just nervous that in the day-to-day things are being managed as the right way. Do you think it's something different? And then the part two of that, and sorry for the stacked question, is what did you learn about trust in business as a result of watching that?
Yep. So just writing this down so I can remember the two-part question, since my memory is not so great anymore. I think I'll start with the trust in business. I think you can say, trust me. By the way, don't ever say that in a meeting. Trust me.
Right.
That's like the last thing.
Not a winning phrase, my friends.
Not a winning phrase. I think trust really comes from transparency and saying something and actually delivering on it. Specifically between the client and agency relationships, the trust part of it came not in the pitch presentation, not in the promises made after or during the whole negotiation process. It was in the contract itself. Mm-hmm. Are you actually translating those promises into deliverables that you are signing, you're signing your name next to, and then actually, 6 months or a year later, when, I come back and check up on those promises, did you deliver? So there's yes, clients trust their agencies. They want to trust their agencies,
right?
But they also want to verify. So it's a trust, but verify. And I think answering the first part of your question, which is, what everyone on the agency side or on the marketing side needs to understand is media and marketing costs are typically the largest line item for a company. They're spending, hundreds of millions of dollars. And in some cases where you have very large advertisers like the P&Gs, the Unilevers, the Amazons of the world, they're spending close to $1 billion.
Yeah.
So if you're the CFO, you're the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer, and you're looking at the line item that's going to the agency, you need to make sure, you would be foolish not to check up on your agency to say, how are they actually delivering on my money? I'm spending, for example, $100. Is it actually working as if it was 100, or is it working as if it was 90? What can the agency do better to bring that 100 to its full potential, or actually deliver greater value?
Right.
So it's such a large sum of money that the client agency relationship is one where you need trust, where you need transparency on both sides.
Yes.
Clients have to be very transparent about who they are and what they expect and what exactly they need. And they should say, we are really chaotic and really tough to work with, but it'll be worth it. And the agencies need to say, well, this is what we need, and this is what we're going to deliver for you. And actually both need to sign on the dotted line almost as a promise, and make sure that both sides are keeping their promise, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now.
Right. Yeah, no. And I think that has application to, obviously we're talking about agency and brand side business, but I think it has application to anything, right? When you're getting into a partnership, when you're thinking about that scope, it is that transparency, and then it is that verification. So whatever side of the business you sit on as you listen to this conversation, I think it's just a really good reminder that trust and verify is the reality of what many people are thinking when they embark on a partnership of some sorts. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then what happened from there? So you're at Accenture because you and I met at WPP.
Yes.
That may not have been the next thing that you did, but take us through then what happened.
So I actually, again, I felt the same thing that I did when I was on the agency side last, which was I felt like my learning had plateaued. My growth was stagnated, and I wanted to do, because I had so many different roles while I was at Accenture, everything from North America to global, from, leadership to business development. So there was, I felt like I had done everything. There was not much more I could give back or learn, right? For me, the turning point is really, what am I still learning from here? And so when I felt that plateau, I started to look elsewhere. After 7 years, I felt like I deserved that. And I did, get a, call from one of the WPP agencies asking, for a C-level role. And I felt like that would be perfect for me to be able to apply my experience of 7 years. Again, remember, I felt like I had walked away with not just one, but multiple MBAs in agency management.
Right. And business in general, supply chain management. And also just, I see how things should be running from an employee engagement, retention, but also financial management and due diligence. I think one of the greatest things that I learned working at a company like Accenture, not just the job that I had, but also, being an employee, is learning to read the fine print.
And I think people don't read the fine print enough, because the fine print is really where all of the true information is. So I wanted to take all of those learning and felt like I could now apply, seeing, the conflicts and some of the reasons why clients pitch their business. I felt I could go to the agency side and say, hey, I know why clients pitch the business. Let's try to help, change some of these things from a cultural, systems, processes, mindset perspective.
Okay.
So we can actually, increase client retention. And that became my mission.
Okay.
And I would joke, hey, we didn't get fired today. A client decided not to pitch their business because they're quite happy. And that really became the mission that, was developed for the entire organization, which was make sure that the clients don't regret having picked our agency, right? That they are still satisfied. Again, let's go back to the trust and transparency. They picked us for a reason. Let's remember that reason every single day in how we work with our clients. They hired us because they felt we were thought leaders, we were strategic, we were innovative, we were transparent and trustworthy. How are we maintaining those principles in our day-to-day?
So really working in that case, both sides of the table, right? Going from agency to consultancy, et cetera, and then coming back to agency and being able to use all of that knowledge and learning, but at a much higher level than when you left. So I love that as a way of constantly thinking about ways that you can refresh your career.
Yes.
So then from there, tell us what you're doing today.
So it was after I left the WPP agency, I, took up a sabbatical because I hadn't had, remember I told you I was working since I was 14.
Yeah.
And I really hadn't had any time off. I didn't have a lot of hobbies growing up. I loved to read. But I didn't really know who I was and what I liked to do. So I decided to take time off, and it was in the middle, it was during the lockdown. So I got to be home with everybody else.
Yeah.
And I started to cultivate my hobbies. So whether it was, actually focusing more on physical fitness, and contradicting that was learning how to make lots of ice cream. That I discovered that to be a passion of mine. I love gardening. I love getting my hands dirty in the soil. So it was just kind of just treating my sabbatical as an endless weekend. Like, what do I want to do today? What do I feel like doing today?
Yeah.
And it was during that time that I remembered an idea that I had years before that I said, if I don't start it now, when else would I have the time to do that? And that idea was how I can help, first it started off as my friends, and then it became, why not expand it to all women? The idea of helping each other how to negotiate or ask for a raise or promotion, and also negotiate their compensation package when interviewing for a new job.
Wow.
The idea started, years before that, when I was interviewing for a role, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and, she was asking me for, hey, details about the conversations that I was having, because she was also looking. And I had a conversation with the recruiter, who asked me okay, what would you like to, what's your number? Which is a typical question that recruiters often ask, is what's your number? Because many states where it's illegal to ask for salary history. It actually, perpetuates the pay gap that women experience. So the recruiters get around that by saying, what's your number? And women typically add 10, 20,000 to their current salary. And that's the number that they give out. But it's not really helpful, because if you're underpaid now in your current role, adding 10, 20 grand may just get you to equity in your current role. And now you're starting behind again in the next role.
Right.
So understanding this, and I said, well, I don't want to make that mistake, because I don't know, now I'm transitioning, different companies, different roles, all of those things. And I just asked, well, what's the range that you're offering? And gave the range. I had to really find it within myself to ask for the top end of the range. I didn't want to seem greedy or selfish. And, typically you kind of give something in the middle, but I just went for it and I just asked for the highest end of the range and ended up getting it and all of these things. And it was just like this profound experience. Like, wait, did that just happen?
Was not just so easy. Right.
That was just way too easy. And it ended up being a 60 to 70% increase from my last base.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Now imagine what I would have done if I just added 10, 20 grand, right? That would
and you found out about it. It's interesting. Brene Brown, I'm going to say in the last 2 months or so, shared a story about being a keynote speaker and how, again, I'm paraphrasing, you can go find the story, but basically she's at the event and another, a manager of the other speakers said, just so you know, you're the keynote, but the people I represent that are men are actually getting paid more than you. And she had this moment of like, wait, what? And then he gave her information that she didn't have before. And then obviously that changed her contribution. I mean, the keynote speaker, one would think would be the reason and the keynote of what it is that everybody's coming to see, but it doesn't always work that way. So I just thought wow, even at that level, it's happening. I mean, we see the pay disparity through Hollywood. We see it in all these different areas. And we can all kind of guess why it happens, but I think that there's a constant understanding that if you don't know, you don't know what you don't know, right? It's like you're a fish in a plastic bag in a fishbowl, thinking you see everything, but you're actually not seeing everything that's available because you just don't know. So
you don't know. And women undervalue themselves. They feel like they don't want to be too expensive, otherwise they won't get paid. Mm-hmm. So going back to my friend, when I was telling her, giving her the play-by-play, so to speak, she was like, oh, that's really good. Save that for me when it's my turn. Mm. And that always stuck with me. So when I was on my sabbatical, I remembered her saying that. And I started to just, I opened up my laptop. I remember it was either a Friday or Saturday night. And I just started to write. Mm. And I started to write about the conversations that I had with the recruiter and the back and forth. And I thought some other things that women should know and be aware of. For example, which states where it's illegal to ask for salary history. And then I started to do more and more research. And I said, oh, what's the pay gap now? It's 82 or 83 cents or something like that. So I started to look up facts and figures to include, because, again, my corporate experience says you've got to give the context and the background before you tell people what to do. So I started to do that. And then I came across this paper where I read that there's 5 reasons for the pay gap. And one of them is women's reluctance to negotiate. Mm. Women's reluctance to negotiate and bias discrimination that exists actually makes up 40% of the pay gap. It's unexplained reasons for the pay gap, because the other explained reasons are things like years of experience. So women will have less true years of experience because they take time off for, parental leave or, for childcare, or occupation and industry and some of the jobs that are just clearly different between what men do and women do. But women's own reluctance to negotiate, it really struck me, and it just hit me to a point where I got really angry. And then I started to read a little bit more about that. And then also their reluctance to negotiate because, one, they just don't know. I didn't know that I should be negotiating. I mean, it was the first time I had done it just several years ago.
Right.
And I didn't know that I could or should. And lots of other women don't. But the other thing is that women don't do it because they don't want to be perceived as selfish or greedy or aggressive. And women are often told, well, you don't need to make that much more. Or I have examples from women that I've spoken to where have been tons that they said, well, doesn't your husband make enough? And
I heard that also at one point in my career, where I heard a male leader say, oh, I got to give this guy a raise. He has a family to support. And there I was as a single woman who was a peer of this individual thinking, well, wait, so does that mean I just never increase my salary? Like I have to find a family? Like,
right.
What does this mean? Like,
and women have families to support too.
100%, right?
So it was some of these things that I started to, when I dug into it further, I got really angry. And I think it really went back to fighting for things that aren't fair. It's that social justice advocacy thing that
there it comes back in, my friends. There it is.
That has been with me since I was very little, which was, that's not fair. That's not right. And the other thing about me, which is, if there's something that I want to see changed, I'm going to try to change it myself.
Right. You're up. It's you.
And it's taking action. And I remember thinking, well, women's reluctance to negotiate, that's something that we can fix. Like that shouldn't be a reason for the pay gap. And so after that, started writing a little bit more and ended up creating an organization, an educational network and resource group for women called Until There Are Nine. And the name stems from, because everyone asks, what's the meaning behind the name? It's inspired by Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her quote when she was asked by reporters, how many women will be enough on the Supreme Court? And she answered, when there are nine, because there have always been nine men and no one has ever questioned that.
Right.
And I love the idea of nine as something that represents equity. Right. So when there are nine women Supreme Court justices on the Supreme, that's when we know we will have reached equity. So the organization's core mission is to help women achieve equity, whether it comes to pay or promotions in the workforce.
Right. And you're doing this as a nonprofit. So I think that's really an important part of the work that you're doing, is that how can women take advantage of what it is that you're doing?
Yes. So it is free for women to sign up on untilthereare9.com. And if they need help, if they need a confidence boost, it's almost like you get your own personal wing woman or wingman. We have a lot of male advisors, which I'm very appreciative of. And you get access to the playbook for free, which helps guide you through the process of whether it's asking for a raise or a promotion or negotiating a new compensation package. So there's verbatims in there that are included that have been used by, a lot of folks who have signed up and gotten help. And we have a ton of advisors, C-suite executives who have signed up to become advisors and help women for free. They are volunteering their time as a way because they believe in the cause as well.
I love it. And I'm also signed up as an advisor. Yes. And, looking forward to helping the people that come into the organization. So I'm going to put all of your information and where they can find this in the show notes. And I think, for anyone listening, getting these negotiation tips, understanding some of the verbatims and the exchanges that will happen is really priceless. And the Until They Are Nine organization doing this as a nonprofit, I know I'm grateful that this is out there and that there's a source that people can find out this information. Bhavana, what are you seeing? The new pay transparency law that just was, I think it was as of November 1st, that, 4 million New Yorkers, New York City, are going to now see how much the jobs pay for what they're applying for. And that is a huge level of transparency. Yes. What are you seeing around that from your end?
So I think New York City doing this is huge and then California actually goes into effect. The entire state of California goes into effect January 1st. So Typically when New York City and California do something, the rest of the country follows.
Sure.
So we are actually seeing a lot of companies like Amex and Microsoft actually provide pay ranges in all of their US-based jobs, which is great, which is one impact already. And what I'm also seeing is there are companies, it's not necessarily retroactive. So I did look up some job postings where, for New York City based jobs that were posted.
I did too. And they're not there. It's only new jobs.
Yeah. It's all new jobs. So
it's all new jobs.
It's not retroactive, which I understand it can be a little bit of a lift to have to go back and update all of the job postings. So please ask if you are applying for a job. Please ask for the range before you move forward. So I'm seeing a lot of differences. And the ranges are actually quite broad. And I think that's
yes.
the thing.
And I've also seen commentary where the ranges are from like, 75,000 to $500,000. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. And I think that's, again, but it's a start, right? So I think people can, gripe about those things, but it is a start. And I think, if we can continue to refine, to give prospective employees as much transparency and guides as possible into what the job pays. But I have seen ranges that are basically, double. So if it starts at 75, it goes up to like 150. It's like, okay, well, so I think it's really important for employees to understand, one, if you're interviewing for a new job, ask how they came up with that range. What's the 75 based on? What's the 150 based on? And how do you progress in between?
Yep.
And
excellent questions.
The employer should be able to give you hard and fast metrics. Well, the 75 is based on, 3 years of experience, and it's based on, number of team, you've managed 2 people, or you're very early in your career, but they can give you some specific metrics. And as you progress and learn and grow in that role, and you get to the high end of the range, you would have had, 6 years of experience. You would have managed a team size of X. You are managing a revenue or a client that looks like, Z. So they should be able to give you metrics. If there's a lot of subjectivity within that range, that should be a red flag. People really just have to think like, well, that's not how will you know you're getting promoted?
Right. I mean, again, it comes back to transparency, right?
Yes.
The transparency and the goal setting with the metrics starts now.
Yes.
And knowing how to ask those questions to be able to advocate for yourself, along with the work that Until We Are 9 are putting into the marketplace. I mean, these are the tools that we need. So 1, we're having legislation, and 2, we're actually having tools that can help people do this. So, I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. So Bhavana, I know that, my listeners are all genders. So I know one of the questions they're going to ask is, can they sign up for this free resource? So tell us how that works.
Anyone can sign up, no matter how you identify.
Did you hear that, everyone? Everyone can sign up for this amazing free resource.
We are here to help. Not everyone receives the guidance early in their career that how to ask for a raise or how to negotiate their, compensation. This is really to help everybody. I think, we've just had more women because of the whole, notion of women's reluctance to negotiate as a reason for the pay gap. But we have helped, men in the past, and we're happy to have everyone.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to put all of your information and where they can find this in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this information. I think this is really the start between legislation and then also having tools like this. This is the start of really trying to get 1, pay transparency, and then 2, closing the pay gap. That's really important for everyone.
Thanks, Jill, for having me and giving me the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one, or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast, because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.